we can start talking about something as equally uplifting: America's colonial domination of lesser nations. Us picking on people who aren't as strong as us. In fact, you know the last time America actually fought with a country that was a first world nation?
Never.
1941, the World War II. Since then, we like to pick on North Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. What are you gonna do? Not to be fair, they all have pretty mean people as their Ho Chi Minh.
Maybe we should put in the Vatican next time.
You don't want to invade the Vatican.
Don't take much as bomb.
They have really mean people in them.
You don't want any part of the Vatican. Alright, let's talk about American imperialism. First thing I want to talk about, there's a bunch of different types of imperialism. Alright? No, get the new packet I just gave you. The Wilsonian foreign policy, I don't know how it happened in terms of how I put my notes. That's actually the last thing we're going to talk about in imperialism. So I'm not really sure what happened notes-wise, but that's the last thing. But American imperialism in general, this is like our new manifest destiny. We had conquered, Americans felt like they had conquered the continent, right? We had gone all the way to California. What happened in 1890? What did the census say in 1890?
The West was closed.
The West was closed. So now, where are Americans going to go?
Outside.
Outside. There was a theory called the expand or explode theory. That we were busting at the seams in terms of the amount of people that we had in our nation. 100 million people. And if we don't expand, we were going to explode. There's obviously some capitalistic arguments to this. They needed new markets to expand into. We were worried that we were, one of the problems that we thought was part of the Panic of 1893 was, and we were overproducing, under-consuming. Well, if we're under-consuming, how can you fix that?
Trade.
Make other people buy our crap, right? In fact, the most famous probably forcing of to open up was when Matthew Perry pulled up alongside Japan with their guns and said, "You will trade with us now." A lot of people wonder why America is seen. A lot of Americans wonder why American government is seen as being overly aggressive. We tend to forget things that America does because we have become so desensitized to our own hegemony. But the rest of the world doesn't forget that, right? And we'll talk about some of those things here today. So we want foreign trade, our expand or explode theory. We're also now trying to compete with Europe. America was the largest democracy in the world, and we were the largest economy in the world. And as such, we're going to compete with European nations. Specifically, what two European nations are we competing with economically? Germany and England. Those are the two that we're competing with. And in terms of military power, England is going to be the superior naval power up through World War I, whereas Germany will be the superior army or superior land force in Europe. And there are a lot of people who thought this was pretty good, that we needed. So these are some of the causes of our new manifest destiny: to spread American civilization all over. So, all right, causes: expand or explode, foreign trade, desire to compete. There's a guy that you need to know named Alfred Mann. He is the author of a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. Captain Alfred Mann. The influence of sea power upon history. What he argues is that if you want to be a powerful colonial nation, what better you have?
Navy.
A really, really strong navy. Now, we're not going to talk about Zen today as much as we are tomorrow, because this chapter was an imperialism chapter, right? Wasn't your Zen chapter imperialistic nation?
Yes.
And we're starting imperialism, so I want to talk about Zen when we get into it a little bit further. But he's saying we got to have a bigger navy. And if you'll remember, in one of the 75,000 jobs that Teddy Roosevelt had, one of them was Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And when Roosevelt comes into office, we're going to have like the 17th or 18th biggest Navy in the world. When he leaves office, we're going to have the second biggest Navy in the world. And this will allow America, as active as Roosevelt was in the progressive era, he was equally as active as an imperialist jingoist. Another thing, there was a guy named Josiah Strong. Josiah Strong wrote a book called Our Country. It was a Christian argument of why our civilization was better, and we need to spread our civilization to the lesser people around the world. We owe them our duty. It is our duty to make them more American.
Wow, that's like socialist. That's why.
Andrew's like, all the guy I can get behind. He's on my Christmas wish list.
Probably is.
So you've got Megan writing Influence and Sea Power Upon History. You got Josiah Strong. And now listen, is Josiah Strong writing this and no one believes him? Or is he writing this because it's a popular idea? When he's writing this, it's the late 19th century. People aren't like, what? I didn't even think about that. American WASPs have long thought that their ideas need to be spread around the world in a sense of control, right?
My grandma still thinks that.
Do what?
My grandma still thinks that.
Well, older generations tend to think that. That's just a matter of fact for Miles. That's just what happened. Another reason I want to talk about is yellow journalism. We talked about Hearst and Pulitzer as yellow journalists who are going to be influential in getting writing sensationalist stories and whatnot. One of the things Hearst is going to do is be an advocate for war and expansion because it's good for sales. It's good for newspapers when we go to war. And what businesses are going to find, although they didn't believe it at first, but after the Spanish-American War, businesses find that war is good for business.
War production.
The Spanish-American War, which we're going to get to maybe today, at least tomorrow, really changed the way that America sees war. It's only going to last 3 months. It's kind of like a JV war, but it will change our country for many reasons. So you get all those reasons. All those causes for war. All those causes for imperialism. Now, and there are a couple of actual events that are going to also start making us look beyond our borders. One of them is the Venezuela boundary dispute. I don't have a map. If you can look up here the map of South America, you can see British Guiana, right here, borders Venezuela. And as mentioned before, a lot of boundaries were often in dispute. In fact, today, lots of boundaries are in dispute, but it doesn't become a big deal until something is found on that border that both sides want. And in the late 19th century, 1892 maybe? 1895. 1895, 1896, Grover Cleveland is in office, and who was an anti-imperialist, and gold is found, and guess who claims the gold is theirs? Britain does. It's ours. Guyana says, no, it's not. Okay, Venezuela says, no, it's not. If Britain comes in with their navy, what is that a violation of? It's a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. So, Cleveland tries to...
I thought the Monroe Doctrine allowed for them to take care of their own colonies.
Exactly, but we made the argument that they were being aggressive towards Venezuela, which is not part of their own colony. And they have the right to defend their land, but they don't have the right to be aggressive with another nation. And they were thinking about using military action against Venezuela, which we saw as to be unacceptable. And Cleveland tried to use arbitration as a way to get in the way of it, but he also was considering military intervention if he had to. Now, if you're England, you need to think about this strategically. Use some strategery. You're England, I don't know if you remember, but England is stretched very thin, right, about 1900. They're colonizing everything. And they're also in a war in South Africa, the Boer War. Have you heard of the Boer War before? Last year, maybe world. And they also are looking at America. Their biggest adversary is Germany. If you're England, why might not you want to make America mad, even though they're not a big military power yet?
Because it could
might need them in the future.
If you push them away towards Germany in the future, you're right. you don't want to have this as being an issue. So European powers played America with pretty soft gloves, and America knew this was going to happen. Remember how Benjamin Franklin did this with the French and the British after the American Revolution? So England backs off, and then the Venezuela boundary dispute is going to enhance not only the Monroe Doctrine, but when Britain consents to arbitration, when we talk about arbitration when it came to the coal strike, they're going to consent to arbitration to deal with the matter legally. It's going to make America look more powerful. The Monroe Doctrine is going to look more powerful. Now, one thing I want to talk about is not really on your packet, but I do want you guys to know who are anti-imperialists, who are imperialists. What political party do you think tended to be more aggressive in the way of imperialism?
Republican Party.
Republican Party did. And today Republicans are still a little bit more aggressive with our foreign policy. The Democrats tend to be a little more diplomatic. Not saying they're warmongers, but they tend to be a little more aggressive. Republicans, like Roosevelt, Taft, tended to think America should push our values and use our military more aggressively, especially when it comes to protecting our investments. Democrats tend to be a little more anti-imperialist. Democrats, remember, those were people who were made up of a lot of different types of people, and so they questioned the idea of, Republicans were more of a WASP stock and saw our country as being one type of person. Democrats saw our country as being a little bit more of a variety and questioned imperialism more. Some really big names were, there was actually a league called the Anti-Imperialist League, which was going to form after the Spanish-American War. People like Andrew Carnegie was an anti-imperialist. Mark Twain was a really big anti-imperialist.
What?
There were Samuel Gompers was. There were some pretty big names in the anti-imperialist movement. One thing with Hawaii, God, I wish I had this PowerPoint, this thing. It's really good about this era. Hawaii was this big giant fruit that Americans wanted to pluck. All right, pun completely intended, by the way. I'm going to draw America and Hawaii, and I'm sorry if you guys aren't as good of a drawer as I am. Here's America, here's Hawaii, alright? Oh, here's Asia. Alright?
Pretty small.
This is not the scale, alright?
Is Hawaii really close to Asia?
No, Hawaii is not really close to Asia. Although I will say, people don't realize, and when I say people, I mean my wife, who has no idea of any geographic location. People don't realize, first of all, Hawaii is really far down. Second of all, it's as far away from California as LA is from New York.
That's...
Yeah, it's a whole other, like, America flipped this way. It's a long way over.
I'm guessing she wants to go to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. Kelly wants to go to Hawaii, right. She's just doing the backstroke there. She had no idea, first of all, she also had no idea how far north Alaska was. Because she always saw something like this, where Alaska and Hawaii are kind of close to each other. And she always knew Alaska was cold and Hawaii was warm, but she never understood in her brain exactly just how far apart they are. I know for people viewing at home, my wife sounds retarded. She's not. She actually has, the equivalent of 2 master's degrees. She's a good math teacher. But she is the worst at geography ever. And not like hard geography, like basic math skills.
I want to see this.
Oh yeah. Let's not tell her I thought
We should do it.
But yeah, she thought it was kind of like an hour away. Anyway, the point is, Hawaii was its own country. But a lot of Americans had plantations there, fruit plantations there. In fact, the most powerful was a guy named Sanford Dole, who you may have heard of, his fruit company before.
Yeah.
Sanford Dole, hold on.